Hello, how is everyone doing today? Welcome back to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, Manny Maradiaga, today on Tuesday, February 25th. Already starting with the NFL Combine, there's lots to talk about, and with it still, getting into its early stages and everything like that, we haven't really seen any of the major testing, that's yet still to come. I thought, with today being my last episode on here, I thought I'd do a mock draft. I thought, what better way to do and kind of send it all off than with an official first-round mock draft. We're going to go through all the picks and stuff like that. So based on, the time of year, the scouting combine, the offseason, I gave my full list of 1 through 32 in the first round, coming up later in the show. For the first couple segments, though, we do got to talk about some things in the NFL, talking about James Cook and a potential contract extension for him and what that could look like, and also the Commanders giving Jonathan Allen the permission to seek a trade at some point this offseason potentially, to see if that materializes into anything that is yet to be seen. But with that, we are going to get into the show, or actually before that, as I always do for you guys, a quick reminder, if you have any questions, comments, or any opinions you'd like to share, please don't hesitate to do so. Your opinion, your insights, any feedback you guys have to give is always very much appreciated and well received, and we always anticipate it and like when you guys are able to do that, right? It adds a lot more to the show. So if you're able to do that and you want to make it absolutely sure that your message stands out and gets featured on the show, there's an easy way to do that just by using the Super Chat feature. As you see on your screen, click the $ at the bottom of the chat box to send in your Super Chat. And this way, it guarantees that your message gets on the air. And it's also a fantastic way, again, to get involved with the show, share any insight, perspective, and add a different point of view to the show as well and the conversations we have. So, again, get involved, use the Super Chat feature, click the $ at the bottom of the chat box, and let us know what's on your mind. So, with that now out of the way, we can start talking about one of the couple topics we have on here, and that being James Cook. James Cook, coming off of a very impressive season with the Buffalo Bills this past year, although they fell short of their goal ultimately, I think personally, individually, he played a massive role in it. And I think it's fair to say that James Cook was the Bills' best player outside of Josh Allen. I don't think that's a wild statement to make whatsoever. And, this year he made the Pro Bowl for a second straight year. He was tied for first with 16 rushing touchdowns, the quietest 16 rushing touchdowns, I believe. Not talked about as much as, like Derrick Henry, right? And the amount of rushing touchdowns that he had. James Cook was right up there, right? And it's not like he's, undervalued. I think this year a lot of people got to see how much value he does bring to the Bills, but also a very quiet, very impressive season overall in a very run-heavy-based offense, very heavy personnel-based offense. He has clearly been a big benefactor of that, as well as Josh Allen and how much he impacts the game. James Cook, I think, is right there. Not at the level of Josh, but he's definitely has a major role to play in this offense that Joe Brady and the Bills run. So with that being the case, now we head into this offseason. James Cook is extension eligible. And for how well he played in the regular season, like I mentioned, but also the playoffs, right? He went on a crazy run there in the playoffs. He had a solid first game. Then the second game against the Ravens, I want to say he scored, but overall, they just had a very good game overall from an offensive perspective. And then in the championship, right, he scored that great touchdown, great extra effort to get into the end zone. And it left a lot of people wondering why in that drive where Josh Allen kind of threw up that prayer, right, why James Cook wasn't more involved. And it kind of left a bad taste in your mouth, right, if you're a Bills fan and you feel like you could have done more. But I think that's the kind of level that James Cook brings, and he was certainly a huge part of it in the playoffs especially. So now that we get into this extension talk with him, right, it's always a bit weird when you're talking about the running backs because there's a lot of polarizing views on it. James Cook went on a podcast recently with Shannon Sharpe and Chad Ochocinco, and he was asked about the scenario, right? He was asked about him being extension eligible, and just he gave his thoughts overall on the whole situation upcoming. And the main thing that he wanted to stress, the main thing that he said on there was that he wants to get what he feels he deserves, right? Based on his contributions, his level of importance to the Buffalo Bills, and just, what he's put out there on tape. The main thing that he said is that he just wants to get paid for the kind of production he's putting out there, right? Nothing, groundbreaking, obviously, but he also added to that statement, I just feel like we're deserving of it. Like, why not? We work all of our life to get paid. Feed me the big bucks. I want to go chase the highest of the highest, and I'm going to keep doing it. That was James Cook in regards to his contract extension on the podcast with Shannon Sharpe and Chad Ochocinco. And I don't think anything that he mentioned was particularly, groundbreaking or anything like that, but I think it is interesting when he mentions, or when he says that I want to go chase the highest of the highest. And, it may bring people to a couple weeks ago, right? When he says those words, you may reference a couple weeks ago where James Cook went on live on his Instagram, and there was a comment on there that he put on there, and he pinned it, which said 15 mil a year. And people are making the connections, right, that he pins that comment, and now he says something like this, that it means immediately that he wants $15 million per year, which would be very uncharted territory for a lot of guys. Really, only Christian McCaffrey is only up there. He's making $19 million per year. But, people make that connection. People make that, inclination that James Cook does something like that, and now he wants $15 million a year, that he feels like he deserves something like that. And if he was to get that, he'd become the highest paid running back behind, like I said, Christian McCaffrey's $19 million per year. But he only got 2 years out of it, right? Christian got that huge extension. Right now he's making $19 million, but it was on a 2-year extension, right? This would be very uncharacteristic for an NFL team to give out $15 million per year for like a 3-4 year deal, right? And that's, I'm sure, what James Cook is looking for, at least a 3-year deal, something like Saquon got or Jonathan Taylor got or something like that. Jonathan Taylor, I believe, is making $14 million or $13 million per year, and now James Cook is next up in this group. And then, if you want to really look down the line, you got guys like Jahmyr Gibbs, coming up. He's going to want a lot of money. So James Cook is really leading like this young running back group into this new area now, especially after last year where I think Saquon and Derrick Henry kind of like they really dominated the league, and especially Saquon and how well he performed. And I know not everyone's going to be Saquon, but I think it opened everyone's eyes to like the running back and the importance and the value there is with that, and just how much the Eagles dominated and how much better they look with Saquon there. People make that connection, and I think now is a good time for these running backs, and I guess James Cook in this sense, to take advantage of that. And although James Cook did say he maybe, is wanting what he deserves or is going to stand 10 toes down on what he feels like he's earned, he did also clarify that he doesn't want to feel like a cancer, and he doesn't like all the attention on him, and will stand on what he wants at the end of the day, right? But he doesn't want to be a distraction or anything like that. He doesn't want it to get ugly, and I thought it was important to reference that, because that's how usually some of these things go, especially last year, I think, with some of the quarterbacks and how, it might have been played out. Brandon Ayuk was another one. That one was pretty icy. Jamar Chase was another one. So it almost feels inevitable, but, James Cook is approaching it with the idea that he doesn't want that to happen. And now, you're talking about an extension for James Cook. What does that look like? $15 million is the number out there, right, per year. And depending on the length of it all and how it fits into the Buffalo Bills' plans, I'm all for running backs getting paid and things like that, but I feel like you got to reserve it for some of the best of the best. And I know it also does depend on the market, right? Because the more these guys get paid, the next group is always the one that benefits the most out of it, not necessarily like the best running backs, right? It just goes on whose turn it is, basically. And James Cook is at a point right now where he's only extension eligible. It's not like they have to re-sign him, right? Because he's still under contract, but he's benefiting off of it just because, it's his turn now. And after a year, like I mentioned, with Saquon going crazy, Derrick Henry, the same thing, now you have more of a leverage point if you're a running back. Like, look at what these teams did. Look what I did on this team, on my own team. Why can't I be trying to push the market a little bit more? And why can't I explore $15 million per year? I think that's all fair. And I don't have a problem with it, but I'm struggling to see a world where, if they give this contract like $15 million to James Cook, it's gonna become more of a norm, right? And now Jahmyr Gibbs if James Cook is getting that, then Jahmyr Gibbs, I keep going back to him. He's definitely gonna get $15 million, maybe even more. So once you open that door, it's very hard to close. And I know the cap keeps going up and everything like that, but when you increase the pay for one position, another position group is going to suffer from it. And you don't know where that's going to be, but managing all of that is going to be interesting to see how it all plays out. But I don't know if I would necessarily give James Cook $15 million. And I know, again, they don't have to stress about it right now per se, but it's a very weird time because they have this potentially to kind of deal with right now. They also got to try and improve their team overall, the Buffalo Bills, get some more wide receivers potentially, address some things on defense, and also on the running back class, which we're going to get more into later with the mock draft, right? How enticing is it with the fact that this is such a deep running back class, right? And maybe to avoid paying James Cook, and I'm not saying that the Bills, or I think that the Bills want to do that, but, this is a very deep class, and there's a lot of good running backs, it looks like. So how enticing is that opportunity to say, you know what, let's go out and draft one. And next season, now we have the leverage. Like, if James Cook doesn't want to take what we think is acceptable, well, we've already have a running back that we drafted, right? Some of those things and how it all plays out timing-wise with the draft and free agency and things like that, it's going to be very enticing, anticipating to see how it plays out that way. Because if they draft a running back, like, they already have 3 of them, like with Ray Davis, James Cook, and Ty Johnson. If they go out and draft another running back, it would give me an inclination, like, all right, like they're kind of planning something here, right? They're having an insurance, right, the Bills to potentially moving on from James Cook. If the money gets to a range where they're not comfortable, they'll draft a running back this year and then have that sort of insurance policy there with them at the running back position. I think that's also interesting to watch, right? Like, in a draft class with so many good running backs, the Bills don't really need one, you would say. But if they go out and draft one, then it kind of rubs me the wrong way a little bit. So with that, James Cook is really still just getting into the early portion of it. Again, $15 million. It's not like he went out and said $15 million. People are assuming that it is something that could happen. I'm sure what that price range will kind of be filtered out as we go along. But at the end of the day, I'd be a little surprised if they came to an extension this early. It would be pretty uncanny to see for a running back, but it was a big year for running backs. So who knows? Maybe this offseason we'll see more of a continuation of that trend for them, in a positive direction. But that is all we have to say on James Cook. We have one more thing to get to before we get to our mock draft, and that's just touching on the latest news that came out of Washington today in regards to one of their more established players, Jonathan Allen, entering the final year of his contract. The Commanders gave him permission now to seek a trade. And with that, we're going to get into all the details, all the information we know about it, and just give our reactions and potentially some fits for Jonathan Allen as to where he could end up if it's not in Washington. So we'll be right back. We're going to head into our first break and return with more on Jonathan Allen.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
We're back here on the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast for our second segment. If you are just joining us now, we just finished talking about James Cook and all the details on a potential contract period for him. You know, this offseason I'm sure it'll be filled with it, but also next offseason as well. Got into the details of that, but now we're moving on to Jonathan Allen. And the news coming from the NFL sources today was that the Washington Commanders officially gave the two-time Pro Bowl defensive tackle Jonathan Allen the permission to look for a trade, and he is entering the final year of his contract. He is one of their more established players, really one of the, I guess, the pillars of what they are right now, right? Because this whole journey of where the Commanders are right now, I guess you could go back to 2017 when he was drafted in the first round, and really getting a player like him of that pedigree, and then leading into now, almost like 8 years later, basically. Jonathan Allen's been through it all, has seen a bunch of stuff with his organization, has seen a lot of changes, a lot of struggles, and now has one season where it looks like they're about to turn the corner. But they have given him permission to seek a trade potentially, and, I mean, it doesn't mean that he is just being kicked out the door, but it is something definitely noteworthy just because, right, you just don't give permission to a guy of this caliber to just, you know what, if you want to leave, like, you can leave, it's fine, you know, we give you permission to do that. That usually doesn't happen with great players. So this is interesting in the fact that, you know, you look at this, and immediately when I heard this news and I started thinking about it, I'm thinking like, all right, well, Jonathan Allen, it kind of makes no sense for him to move on if one of their biggest weaknesses was run defense. And I know they drafted a young player like Johnny Newton, you know, just last year in the second round, and they extended Deron Payne, which is great. But, I mean, again, you just don't let Jonathan Allen, a guy like that, walk out the door, especially when you need to improve your run game, right? So I'm thinking, all right, well, if they're going to let him go, immediately I went to, like, Myles Garrett, and I know it's not necessarily the same position, defensive line, I guess, technically, but outside versus inside. And when you're talking about run stuffers, you don't really think of Myles Garrett right away. You just think of him as a pass rusher. And I'm just thinking, like, if Jonathan Allen's going to need an extension and, you know, you're really serious about going after Myles Garrett, if you're the Washington Commanders, this move then does make a little bit of sense, because if you do want to move on from Jonathan Allen and you do want to get Myles, it's going to be hard to pay all of them, right? I think they gave Deron Payne like 4 years, 90-something or 80-something million dollars. You know, Johnny Newton doesn't really cost you that much, but they do have some salary cap space to work with. But if they do want to get Myles Garrett, you know, he's probably going to want an extension, you know, rather soon, right? I think his contract is almost up as well. So it's going to be hard to pay him, have Deron Payne on the pay sheet as well. And then, I mean, before you know it, you're going to get to paying some other guys as well. So that could start running up on you pretty quickly. So the fact that Jonathan Allen is 30 years old, you know, he's probably going to want like a 3-year deal or something like that. And also the fact that you did draft a guy like Johnny Newton to be in there and learn from him at least 1 year. And also the fact that you could save almost $17 million in cap space by freeing him up with a trade or releasing him. I think that's also very enticing as well, because I think the Commanders want to be in a spot where they do go out and have the liberty of trying to bring in a lot of good players, especially when they have the commodity of Jaden Daniels, right? If you have that attraction, that ace in the hole, you want to take advantage of it, right? You don't want it to be a situation where, all right, you want a player and a player wants to come in, say like T. Higgins or something. The last thing you want is for the financial side to get involved. So I understand it by that point. Jonathan Allen is in the later portion of his career, and also this is the year to do it, right? Because like I'm going to talk about in my mock draft, this draft class is filled to the absolute brim with great defensive talent, and especially on the defensive line. There's a lot of guys that, you have your Walter Nolans, your Kenneth Grants, your Derek Harmons, the guys that jump at you right away. Your Mason Grahams obviously is another one, but you have a bunch of other guys beyond that in the later rounds where you can find a lot of great talent in the spot where Jonathan Allen clearly plays. So if there was ever a time to do it, to make a decision like this would be for this draft class, right? You have the opportunity to move on from Jonathan Allen, get cheaper, potentially open up a lot more cap space, and still maybe double up on defensive linemen in the draft if you so choose to. So I think they probably felt like this was the best time to do it. And by all of those reasons, I kind of am on board with it now. But I think with the fact that you are kind of going in this direction now, I think it makes me more convicted that if I was in their shoes, that I want to double down on getting that defensive line shored up, right? If you are losing Jonathan Allen, you better make sure to get maybe like two guys at least on that side of the ball, in that position group where you really shore up that run defense. Because this defense played pretty decent, right? They were all right pass coverage-wise and stuff like that. They get after you as well, but that run defense, they got absolutely just shoved into the ground and run over by the Philadelphia Eagles. And, that's a divisional opponent, so it's not like it's just going to go away anytime soon. You're going to have to combat that. And I think the Commanders are in a good spot right now where they're really distancing themselves a little bit if they play their cards right from the Cowboys and definitely from the Giants. So you got to make sure you take all the required steps to making sure you address that. Because outside of that, I know we've talked about wide receiver and things like that, but shoring up that defense and the way Jaden Daniels just makes everybody else around him better, making sure that defense is solid, you don't have to worry about them, it really opens up the amount of opportunity you can have with this team. So making sure if you do go ahead and move on from Jonathan Allen, you reassure that defensive line, maybe the linebacker position as well, whether that means bringing back Bobby Wagner or looking elsewhere. They got to reassure that for sure this year. And, now looking at Jonathan Allen and, what it could mean for him and where he could end up, he's 30 years old. Not like you could just put him on the shelf and just forget about him. I think he could definitely contribute for maybe like a 3-year deal. I think that would be fair, something that he's looking for, I'm assuming. I don't know. But I think like a 3-year deal, something like that for him would be acceptable. And you look at teams like maybe it'd be kind of funny if he went with the Eagles, right? If he went from Washington to the Eagles. It wouldn't surprise me at all, honestly. But I know that the Eagles are having guys like Milton Williams and Josh Sweat as free agents and stuff like that. So, they're one of the best, if not the best, at restocking at that spot. So it wouldn't surprise me too much. And it's kind of funny how the Eagles and Commanders are connected in this sense, because both of them are heavily linked with trying to get a guy like Myles Garrett. So it kind of makes me think like if Myles ends up on the Commanders and the Eagles have two guys as free agents, that they wouldn't mind bringing in Jonathan Allen, right? They would have Jonathan Allen make the short trip over from Washington to go play for Philly, or if the Eagles, get Myles Garrett, Jonathan Allen, I wouldn't be also surprised if he ends up staying with the Washington Commanders as well. So that could be an option for him. I think the Rams would be very enticing because, you would have a defensive line of him, potentially Kobe Turner, Braden Fisk, Jared Verse, who just won Defensive Rookie of the Year, and Byron Young on the other side of it, right? All those guys, very young, all those guys except Jonathan Allen, right? Obviously, adding a veteran presence like that would be great, fantastic depth for them to have at that spot. So I think that would be interesting for Jonathan Allen, or maybe the Cowboys, another divisional opponent that everybody knows they need run help. So if they can't figure out anything with Oza Odigizua, Jonathan Allen, I don't think is the worst option to look at. Also the Falcons, right? They need a lot of pressure help and just defensive line help. I think that would be a nice fit for them to bring in a veteran presence like that. Even the Cincinnati Bengals too. They just released Sheldon Rankings. So bringing in a guy that plays at that spot also, again, not the worst idea in the world. Those are just a couple of teams I was thinking about. But yeah, I mean, very early stages of this. It just came out this morning, so we'll see where it goes. I feel like it is kind of heading towards a release at a little bit, just because if you give them permission now, the way I'm looking at it, it's like there's no real incentive for another team to come out and be like, oh, like let's go out and sign Jonathan Allen right now. Like there was nothing pushing for a move like this to happen. You know what I mean? It's like teams are just going to be willing to wait on Jonathan Allen. And for the Commanders, if they put him on the trade block themselves, and there must be something there, obviously, right, that they are interested and wouldn't mind moving on from him. So if that's the case, why not just wait for like June or something, after June, where they release him as a post-June 1st designation? That could be something. And that way, I feel like around May, probably after free agency a little bit, we'll have a better idea of where this is going. But it was something that was a little bit unexpected. I didn't think that, the Commanders were going to release or just move on from a guy like that, especially because that's a position of need. But they definitely, I have to believe, have bigger things in mind, right? They have to, because you just can't get worse, right? You have to get better, one, but the thing you can't do is get worse, right? After the Eagles ran 7 touchdowns in on you, they have to address it somehow, and losing a guy like Jonathan Allen is definitely not the way to do that. But we'll see. It's still very, very early stages of it for now. But for us in this show, it is time now to get into our official mock draft now. I split it up into 3 parts because I know I've done a mock draft before, and I tried to do it in 2, and it was still very rushed. So I split it up into 3. So once we get through this mock draft, it'll take us to the end of the show. So when we return, we're going to get to the first 10 picks of this draft class, go through them, my selections, some trades in there, and see where we go from there. So don't go anywhere. You're listening to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
All right, guys, we are back here on the Chip Shot Football Podcast, and now it is time to get into our official mock draft on here. Apologies for no graphics or anything like that. I was having trouble with it before, and I just couldn't get it to work. So we're just going to go through it, just like this, face to face. And this year is a very interesting class because it feels very uncanny that, we're not talking about, like, quarterbacks and, 2 or 3 offensive linemen and things like that. It feels like it almost feels like we're not talking enough about the draft, if that makes sense, from my point of view at least, because for whatever reason, it is very heavily based on defense, and that, I guess, just doesn't attract too many people. Like last offseason where I was kind of starting this, everything I could read be exposed to was Jaden Daniels, Caleb Williams, Drake May, Michael Penix, and all these sort of things, right? I know it was a very unique quarterback class, but still, this draft class just feels a little bit kind of offbeat for whatever reason. But with that now, we can start on the top 10 now, and we'll go through each section for the rest of today's show. So I included trades in my mock drafts because I think it is part of it. Teams trade, right? Why not include it in your mock draft? And with that being the case, right off the bat, at number 1, I'm thinking that there is going to be a trade. I've read and I've watched, I believe, Todd McShay's podcast recently, and he said from all the sources that he was, listening to and talking to, having interactions with, that the Titans ideally would like to move from the number 1 overall pick. And I think it makes sense. I like that idea for them. I think that's a spot where in a weird quarterback class, and I know they have the first overall pick, right? They could select Cam Ward if they feel like he's the best player and be done with it, right? They need a quarterback probably, right? I don't think Will Levis has convinced many people at all. So some people might be thinking that this is a no-brainer, select the quarterback, or maybe a generational player like they said, like Travis or Abdul Carter. But I just don't feel like one player is going to turn things around for the Titans. So I like the idea of trading back, accumulating a lot of draft capital, and continuing to build this thing. Because this season, they're probably not going to make the playoffs. I don't think that's a crazy thing to say. So I feel like stocking up on it and then planning for the future where there's potentially better quarterbacks, better quarterback classes, that makes me more comfortable. So I think a trade here would be very realistic, and I think that a team that would need to come up and try to get a quarterback, I think, would be the New York Jets. So I made a trade happen. The Jets are moving up to number 1. The Titans are moving back to number 7, and now the Jets have the first overall pick in this year's draft. Why? Because they need a quarterback. Sam Darnold's not the answer. Jordan Travis, the quarterback they selected last year, coming off of a very gnarly injury, is not the answer. I don't really like Justin Fields. I don't know. It's not really convincing me. So I think making a move like this, because they have a good roster. It's not like the Titans where they need a couple pieces, right? Like the Jets have great players at a lot of different spots. You think of Garrett Wilson, Quincy Williams, Sauce Gardner, all these guys that they have. Will McDonald came through last year. They got to get more out of Breece Hall, obviously, but they definitely have more to work with than the Titans. So making a move like this, going up and getting who I have here at number 1, Cam Ward, by trading with the Tennessee Titans, I think would be something that would shake this entire draft to its core. And that's what I love seeing, these crazy moves. And what better way to have a last episode than having a crazy move like this, right? I definitely also, to defend this pick, I don't think it's as crazy as having like a couple running backs in the first round, because I think that's insane to have. I only have one running back going in the first round, and I've seen already a couple where they have like 2 or 3, and I think that's bananas. Not as crazy as the Jets trading up to number 1. So that's what I'm doing. The Jets trade up to number 1, draft Cam Ward, and they get their quarterback of the future. And this team is still very young, right? It's not like they're filled with 30-year-olds, really. A good amount of them are young. So I think growing together, embarking on this journey with Aaron Glenn, I think would be interesting to have here. So I have the Jets trading up and drafting Cam Ward at number 1. Then at number 2, the Browns don't move, don't do anything. And I think with them, I think Myles Garrett is going to leave. I think Myles Garrett is going to be playing elsewhere. I know they came out again today saying that they weren't going to trade him, but I think it's only a matter of time. If Myles Garrett is true to his word in wanting to go out and find an opportunity where he can go win, not just kind of settling for a better contract, I think Myles will be moving on. And what better opportunity are you ever going to have than this opportunity here, where if you do lose Myles Garrett, you can just draft Abdul Carter. And that's who I have them selecting at number 2. Abdul Carter could arguably go number 1. The Jets could trade up and get Abdul Carter if they wanted to, and I don't think anybody would be flabbergasted or outraged that they did that, right? Because that's how good Abdul Carter is. And I don't think the Browns can find themselves in a better spot to getting a guy that's close, even remotely close to replacing a guy like Myles Garrett than Abdul Carter, right? And the quarterback situation, again, I wouldn't love Shedeur Sanders to go to Cleveland. I think that it doesn't really excite me. It doesn't really give me too much more hope that they're going to be any different. Whereas with Abdul Carter, if you bring him in, you at least kind of ease the blow of losing Myles Garrett, right? So I think that makes the most sense to me. I have Abdul Carter going number 2. Then at number 3, the New York Giants. Again, I could have gone Shedeur Sanders. Probably a lot of people would have. But I went with Travis Hunter, and I don't think that's a wrong thing to do either, because Travis could go number 1 easily. Having him drop any lower than number 3, I think, would be a mistake. So I think the Giants here take the best player in this draft class. And, again, the quarterback position is going to be something that people are going to be like, you're insane. Like, how can you not draft a quarterback? This team's just going to stink without one again. But I think if there was ever a player to kind of rectify and justify you not drafting a quarterback in this draft class, again, especially because the quarterbacks are pretty questionable, it would be a guy like Travis Hunter, right? He's made for the spotlight. He's made to play in New York and for everything in this organization to be around him. Then you have also Malik Neighbors, right? He's also a star. If there was anybody to justify not drafting a quarterback, it would be Travis, right? And I think that's fair. And getting him to electrify New York City along with Malik Neighbors, they can go sign someone. They could go and sign Sam Darnold if they really wanted to. They can go and sign Kirk Cousins or something like that. And they would be okay with Travis and Travis and Malik Neighbors, Tyrone Tracy. They're going to do okay. They're not going to be picking in the top 3. I have a good amount of confidence in that, right? And I think Travis would be a good pick here for them, selecting the best player available. And again, not just drafting a quarterback because, oh my God, we need a quarterback. Let's just draft whoever, right? I don't think it really makes too much sense. So I'm going to go with Travis Hunter. Then at number 4, we got New England, and it's either really a defensive player or an offensive lineman, I believe, here for New England. And I think the fact that Mike Vrabel has seen the benefits of playing with a guy like Vince Wilfork or coaching a guy like Jeffrey Simmons, I think thinking that the Patriots are going to select Mason Graham here, I think makes the most sense because of that reason, right? I think his connection to seeing how important it is to have a guy like that in the middle of your defense makes the most sense to me. I know offensive line, you got to protect Drake May and things like that, but I think the way Vrabel's kind of wired and his preferences a little bit, seeing Mason Graham there, I think he wouldn't want to miss an opportunity like that, so I'm going to go with Mason Graham here at number 4. Then at number 5, we have another trade. I have 2 trades in the top 5. The Jacksonville Jaguars are at this pick, but I didn't like my options there. I didn't like them just because I think that they could get them later on. So with that, I think the Chicago Bears are going to trade up. And they're going to trade up, switch spots with the Jacksonville Jaguars, and select their best player on the board, which is Will Campbell, an offensive tackle, to go out and finally protect Caleb Williams. He was sacked the most times this year. Ben Johnson knows how valuable it is to have an offensive line that you could definitely depend on. Darnell Wright on the right side looks like a very solid option. Now you bring in Will Campbell. He could go over there to the left side, and now you have 2 cornerstone pieces at each tackle spot where you can definitely work with, and you could definitely have a lot of benefits from that, right? And just protecting Caleb, I think, would be a huge thing for them. Will Campbell, you think of the teams in between, the Jaguars could select Will Campbell, that could be something they do, but with that, the Raiders could also do the same thing. The Panthers could arguably do the same thing, the Saints as well. I think the Bears see an opportunity here where they could trade back. Again, mainly because the Jaguars, I feel like they could get some more draft capital if they trade back and still get a player that's valuable to them. They see this opportunity, they call them, they make the trade, and they get Will Campbell here at number 5. Then at number 6, I think now finally we can start talking about Shedeur Sanders, and I have him landing with the Las Vegas Raiders. I think from what I've read, from what I've seen so far, and just tuned into, it feels like Shedeur is kind of separating himself from Cam a little bit. A lot of people aren't happy that he's not throwing at the combine, and if Cam does throw, I talked about it yesterday, it'll create even more of a gap. And I think that opens up the opportunity for Shedeur to drop a little bit here. And it would benefit nobody more than the Las Vegas Raiders, right? Because you have that connection with Tom Brady. They obviously need a quarterback, right? And I know they've been connected to Sam Darnold, and I almost didn't put Shedeur Sanders here for that reason. But at the end of the day, I feel like Las Vegas, the Raiders, there's really nothing you could write home about with the Raiders other than Max Crosby. Christian Wilkins had a bad year last year. He got hurt. You need a guy like Shedeur to come in, I believe, be the face of that organization and really be the face of Las Vegas, essentially. And I think he's the perfect person to do that. So I like that. I mean, I'm a fan of Shedeur. I just feel like the way things have gone right now, he is dropping for whatever reason. So I think he would drop to this spot. The Raiders would love it, and they would get their quarterback here at number 6. And then moving on here to the last couple picks at number 7, with that trade that we made before with the New York Jets, the Titans now have the opportunity to select Jalen Walker, the edge rusher from Georgia. And of course, it's not Abdul Carter, right? You do miss on the big fish per se, but you do get a lot of draft capital back, and you still get one of the better edge rushers in this draft, which is a need for them, obviously. So I think, to me, overall, big picture, that's a big win. Not only do you get one of the better guys, you get more options to draft even more bodies to this roster that needs as much talent as possible. So I think this worked out very well for the Titans. And then at number 8 here, we have the Carolina Panthers, and I have them drafting Teteroa McMillan, the wide receiver from Arizona. I think this makes the most sense to me. They could have gone for a couple spots, Mikael Williams, other guys like that. But I think to get a guy like McMillan, a clear number 1 type wide receiver, the way Bryce Young finished the year last year and how encouraging it was to see him not only get benched but come back from that and look a lot better in the second half of the year, go out and get him a bona fide number 1 guy to keep that progression going, that development growing, and now you've got 2 young, exciting players that can grow together in McMillan and Bryce Young. I would love to see them come together and form a great duo there. We see a lot of great duos. I think this has the opportunity to be the next best one. So I like McMillan here at number 8 to the Panthers. Then at number 9, I have the Saints drafting Mikael Williams. A lot of people are very high on him, and if it wasn't for an injury, a lot of people are saying that he could have gone like top 5 or something like that, right? But the Saints, very fortunate to be here at number 9 and have a guy like him sitting here, with their new defensive coordinator, Brandon Staley, to get a cornerstone piece like this, to kind of learn from a guy like Cam Jordan, and also the fact that Chase Young is currently a free agent. I think you need a guy like this to be here for the long haul. So drafting Mikael Williams here, great value, one of the better edge rushers. It would be a home run hit, I believe, for the Saints on a very old defense. So bringing in some youth, I think, would also serve them well. And then lastly here, from the trade that we also had before with the Jaguars and the Chicago Bears, I got the Jaguars now selecting Will Johnson, the defensive back from Michigan. They need a lot of help in pass defense. They had the worst pass defense in the NFL last year, and they got good pass rushers. They do. They got Trayvon Walker, Allen Hines. They got Eric Armstead, obviously, and then on the other side, it's escaping my mind who they have on the other side. Well, they have Josh Allen Hines. They have him over there. So they have good pass rushers. They are able to bring in a lot of heat to opposing quarterbacks. They just need the time to get there, and they haven't really had that on the back end. So having a guy like Will Johnson there gives you the opportunity to play man coverage, to kind of shut down somebody with his skill set. And I think not only do you get more draft capital, but you address a spot with one of the best guys at that position. So it makes sense to me. And that's the top 10 for right now. So with that being the case, we still got a lot more picks to get to. So we're going to go to a quick break right now. And when we return, we're going to go through the rest of the draft in the next 2 segments right after this.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
We are jumping right back into the spot where we left off with the official 2025 mock draft for the Chip Shot Football Podcast. If you missed out on the last segment, we went through our top 10, and because of time's sake, we're splitting it up into 3 sections. We did 1 through 10 before, now we're doing 11 through 21, and capping it off with 22 to 32 in the next segment. So we finished off on number 10, and now it allows us to go to number 11, start getting into the teens here at number 11. Just as a disclaimer, we have no more trades after this. So just so you guys know, we're not going to do any more crazy trades. So the rest of the order is as it goes officially. So at number 11, we have the 49ers. For me, I think this would be a great pick for them. Jahdae Barron, the defensive back from Texas. And I think this would be a great selection for them because Robert Saleh is coming back, and I believe he would love to have a guy like Jahdae Barron and his skill set available to him and his defense, especially because you got guys like Travarius Ward and Talanoa Hufanga as free agents, a safety and a corner as potential departures for this defense. And you bring in a guy that has the skill set to line up at safety and potentially at corner as well. So having a guy that could do both, not that it completely negates the fact that you could lose both of them, but now you have a guy that could play both, and it gives you more options, more variety, and more of an opportunity to give different looks, line him up at a bunch of different spots as well. So I think the versatility, the endless amount of ceiling. He has no ceiling, really, I feel like, Jahdae Barron. I think that's something that's going to be very attractive to a guy like Robert Saleh. So I think at number 11 would be a great pick for the 49ers to get Jahdae Barron. So that's 11. At number 12, we have the Dallas Cowboys. And I know Ashton Jeanty has been a big favorite here at number 12, but I think for them, with the retirement of Zach Martin recently, I think they got to go with Tyler Booker, arguably the best natural guard in this draft class from Alabama, and plugging him in to replace a guy like Zach Martin, I think makes the most sense. And the decision of Zach Martin kind of makes the pick for you, because if you don't replace Zach Martin, people take a great Hall of Fame guard like that for granted, right? You don't really notice him. I always say it, right? Like, offensive lineman, if you're never talked about, that's the best thing that could happen to you, because you're doing your job, you're just going about your business, and nobody has anything to say about you. But if everyone's talking about you and you're always being brought up, then there's probably something wrong. And Zach Martin, I think, is kind of overlooked in that sense. And now that he's gone, it could be or will be a huge hole in that offensive line. So bringing in a guy that you can develop and that you could essentially replace him with at some time makes the most sense to me. Tyler Booker, to get him in at this spot, makes the most sense. And, I mean, if you get Ashton Jeanty, it does you no good if you can't run block for him anyway. So you got to address that first. You got to protect Dak Prescott because you're paying him a lot of money as well. you go out and get an offensive lineman, I think, for the Dallas Cowboys. Then another offensive lineman goes off the board at number 13. I got Armand Menbo going to the Miami Dolphins. Can play offensive tackle, can also play interior offensive line, is exactly what the Miami Dolphins need, because I don't want to see Tua hitting the ground more than like 5 times max next season, right? Because, there's all this stuff about his concussions and his medical stuff and issues like that. You don't want to see another thing like that happen again to him. So you got to do whatever you can to protect him, and it also doesn't help that they could be losing both starting guards during free agency, right? Like, both of them are going to be free agents. So the last thing you need to do is take away from an already average offensive line. So with that and the potential of maybe losing one or both of them, go out and get yourself an offensive lineman. Same thing, similarly to the Cowboys, I think the Dolphins need to go out and address that first, eat your vegetables first, and then they could start talking about adding pieces on this offense and stuff like that. But if you don't get an offensive lineman, it does you no good if Tua gets hurt again because he's not protected and now you're playing without a quarterback, right? That does nobody any good. So go out and draft a guy like Armand Menbo to protect Tua. So that's number 13. At number 14 now, I think this is the easiest pick, arguably, for me. At number 14, the Indianapolis Colts are going to select Tyler Warren. And it brings me back to last season where I believe the Colts were picking... I think they traded back, didn't they? They were picking number 9 or something like that first, and they traded back, I believe. I could be getting that wrong, but they ended up picking at 15, or I think that was it. I think they were picking at 15, and it was a weird spot, right, where you didn't know what was going to happen with nobody expected so many quarterbacks to go that early, right, obviously. So the draft board looked very different, and there was something that I read from a source just coming around the NFL draft that if Brock Bowers was there, that they would have no problem selecting a guy like that. And, of course, they missed out on him because the Raiders selected him. But now they have the next best thing, potentially, in Tyler Warren. And I think this is a no-brainer for them to select Tyler Warren, a sort of security blanket, but also a great playmaker that could line up anywhere to help out this Colts offense that has some good players with Jonathan Taylor, Josh Downs, Michael Pittman, I almost forgot his name, right? They have a lot of good players with those guys. And adding a guy like Tyler Warren that you can do so many things with and line him up in so many different spots that could also block for you, I think Shane Steichen would love to have a guy like that. And it would help out, their quarterback, Anthony Richardson, and having a sure target like that. I think this would be a fantastic pick for them, especially because I think on a lot of people's big boards, he's definitely like top seven prospect for them. So to get him at 14 would be insanely great value for them. So I love this pick for the Colts to get Tyler Warren. Then at number 15, another pick that I really like for the Atlanta Falcons here is drafting a guy like Mike Green, a pass rusher from Marshall. It's no secret that they desperately need help at this spot. They finished 31st last season with only 31 sacks. Matthew Judon was okay, but they clearly need a lot more help. And what better than the guy that led the entire country with 17 sacks to come in and try and fill that void right away. They don't need to get cute. They don't need to draft this just like weird... Not weird, but they just don't need to overthink it is basically what I'm thinking of here, right? They don't need to look too deep into it, right? Go out and get Mike Green. He had a great Senior Bowl. He wowed a lot of people with driving one of the offensive tackles like 5 yards, 7 yards the other way during the Senior Bowl. I'm sure a lot of people saw the clip. So go out there. It's obviously your biggest need. Go out and get that guy and add to this defense, right? Because getting a guy like Mike Green, he's getting a lot of buzz. At the Combine, I expect him to test very good. And getting him at 15, maybe a month or two ago would have seemed a little bit too high for him. But now it looks like the perfect range to get a guy like him. So it makes the perfect sense for the Falcons to get Mike Green and add to that defensive line. Then at number 16, we get another pass rusher. I got Shamar Stewart from Texas A&M going to the Arizona Cardinals, another team that struggled getting pressure on the quarterback. They were 28th in pass rush win rate this past season, but they do got some exciting guys like Kaiser White, Zaven Collins, and Dante Stills, two West Virginia guys there doing great stuff for the Arizona Cardinals. And then now adding a guy like Shamar Stewart, you need as much pass rush as you can possibly get, right? Look at the Super Bowl champions, right? They got endless amounts of talent there, right? On top of other things, of course, right? But getting guys that could help you get to the quarterback. Dante Stills was a very pleasant surprise. Zaven Collins has probably been one of their more reliable guys, and same thing with Kaiser White. And now, I know they had a rookie last year that didn't really do too much. I believe his name was Darius Robinson, if I'm not mistaken. So you got him coming into his second year. You add a guy like Shamar Stewart. Now you got a good amount of bodies there to rotate, and hopefully, they could turn a corner a little bit for you. And that's great for a young up-and-coming team like the Cardinals. So drafting a guy like Shamar Stewart, I think, really excites me for a young defense that Jonathan Gannon is trying to build. Then another defensive line guy at number 17 for the Cincinnati Bengals. I got them selecting Walter Nolan, the defensive tackle from Ole Miss. And it makes the most sense to me. Maybe if I feel like they're going to keep T. Higgins, that's why I'm not going wide receiver. So I'm under the impression that they're going to keep him. But they also just released Sheldon Rankins. You don't know what's going to happen with Trey Hendrickson, right? If he's going to get an extension or not. Getting a guy like Walter Nolan and really addressing the defense, which has been the worst part of their team this past season, has to be a major target for them to improve, right? And getting a guy like Walter Nolan here, I think would be huge for them to secure that defensive line a little bit more. Even if Trey Hendrickson does stay, adding him to Trey Hendrickson, I think would be a great duo on top of, like Sam Hubbard as well. So adding to this defensive line, they weren't great against the run either last year, and they were 25th in sacks. I think adding a guy like this, of this level of potential, is very exciting for the Bengals, right? Because offensively, I don't really think they need too much, right? Like Joe is there. If they keep T. Higgins, they're going to be just fine. So I like Walter Nolan here for the Bengals. Then at number 18, I got the Seattle Seahawks. I got them selecting Gray Zabel, the interior offensive lineman from North Dakota State. Lincoln Tomlinson is going to be a free agent this offseason, and their interior offensive line contributed to 54 sacks allowed this season, which is the third most in the NFL this past season. Obviously, you got to address it. So bringing in a guy like Gray Zabel, climbing up a lot of people's draft boards from what I've been listening to recently, getting him at number 18 might feel a little bit early for some people that don't really know too much about him, but a lot of people love his mobility, love the idea of him pulling and the athleticism that he brings. I think that would bring a lot to Seattle, especially because Kenneth Walker is a good running back, but you don't really see him too much because that interior offensive line doesn't do him any favors. So I think this would be a good pick for the Seattle Seahawks here at number 18. Then at number 19, we got the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and I have them selecting Jihad Campbell, linebacker out of Alabama. I could have also gone wide receiver here, but I feel like Chris Godwin is going to stay. It's going to be hard for me to think that the Bucs are going to let him leave. I feel that they're going to do a lot or anything possible to keep him in the building, obviously. So what's the next biggest need? Well, you got a Hall of Famer in Levante David retiring potentially, or just hitting free agency. He's going to be a free agent. I don't know if he is going to come back, but he is also 35 years old. So it's not like he has 10 years, right, or like the next 4 years to go. Bringing in a guy like Jihad Campbell to learn from him or be thrusted into that starting spot right away would be something that I think makes the most sense for the Buccaneers to try and fill that gap and kind of be ahead of it, right? Not have Lavonte David leave and now you just don't have another option. Bringing him in would be very enticing for me, right? He's the best linebacker, I believe, in this draft class, so getting him here to potentially replace Lavonte David makes the most sense. So, with that now, ending with the teens, we're going to go into the 20s here a little bit. At number 20, I have the Denver Broncos selecting Ashton Jeanty, running back out of Boise State, the only running back I believe that should be going in the first round. And the Broncos get the best one, clearly. Bo Nix was awesome. I still think they need another wide receiver, but the running game really wasn't there for them last year. It was okay, but they definitely need to use it a lot more. And Ashton Jeanty is the guy to be able to do that with, right? To hand the ball off to him multiple times consecutively and take some of that pressure off of Bo Nix. Because in his second year, no one's going to be surprised by Bo Nix anymore, right? It's going to get tougher for him. And now, if that does get tougher for him, now he has a running back that he could certainly depend on to just hand the ball off to him and make things a lot easier for him in his second year. They could address wide receiver in free agency or at some point in this draft class, because wide receiver is also a pretty deep spot. They got options here, but if you have the opportunity to select the best running back, especially if you need more from the running game, I think the Broncos would be remiss to pass up on this opportunity. So that means at number 21, to end this segment, we got the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think it makes the most sense. It's been, excuse me, it's been the most obvious pick to me that the Steelers are going to end up with wide receiver Emeka Egbuka from Ohio State. I don't think it's like surprising or anything like that. The Steelers clearly need a wide receiver. And apart from McMillan, you have your Matthew Goldens, you have your Luther Burdens, but I feel like Egbuka is the safest spot for the Steelers, the safest option for them. So the Steelers are not one set to really throw too many surprises at you, right? Ultimately, it always ends up being the pick that a lot of people anticipate, and I think Emeka Egbuka makes the most sense, won't give you any trouble, seems very low maintenance, sure hands, coming from a great program at Ohio State. It's exactly what the Steelers need. Quarterback is obviously a big need, right? Defensive line also, but to not get Egbuka here, I think would be surprising to me if they just passed up on him, right? Knowing that he's just sitting there, if they just missed out on him, that would be surprising. So the Steelers get a wide receiver and address that spot around earlier than they usually do, right, from past history. So that's all the mid-level picks here, 11 through 21. We're going to go to our last break now, and when we return, we're going to end our mock draft with picks number 22 all the way to the Eagles at number 32. Thank you guys for joining me here on the last segment of today's show. Just another, just continuation from what we've been talking about the last two segments. If you weren't tuned in, we were doing our official mock draft. We started in segment 3 with the top 10 The last segment was 11 through 21. Now we're going to go to the final end of it here with 22 to 32. And we finished off the last segment talking about the Steelers at 21, selecting Emeka Egbuka, wide receiver from Ohio State. So now at 22, the Los Angeles Chargers. I was really on the brink of having them select a guy like Luther Burden, but I think the way, things go usually with like former coaches and former spots like Jim Harbaugh here with Michigan, I think Colston Loveland is going to end up being the pick here for the Chargers, a tight end for them. They're very run-heavy, very heavy personnel as well. They love their tight ends, but I didn't love who their tight ends were. I think they could definitely get better. So adding a guy like Colston Loveland, I think right away he would have the trust of Jim Harbaugh. He would know a lot about him, obviously, because he coached him and stuff like that. So he's one of his guys. Bring him in. Fits right into their system, and I think he would hit the ground running with Jim Harbaugh right away and this offense. And also, like I mentioned with like the Bengals a little bit, this class is very deep at wide receiver as well. So to get and miss out on a guy like Luther Burden, I think is okay because you can get some more guys in the second round if you desperately need to, which the Chargers definitely do. But I think Colston Loveland will end up being the pick here for them. Then at 23, I got the Packers getting one of my favorite players in this draft. Last year, it was Mike Sanders from Michigan. I would have loved the Steelers to have selected him, but it was never going to happen because, they were going to get Roman Wilson, Zach Frazier, a tackle. I really wanted Mike Sanders, but he ends up going to Washington, and he's doing great over there. And I think the Packers here, number 23, I have them selecting Azare Thomas, defensive back from Florida State University. I think you have Travis Hunter. You got guys that like Will Johnson. You got guys that like Janae Barron, obviously. Benjamin Morrison is also in there, right? You can't forget about him. But I really think that Azare Thomas from Florida State University has the chance to be like top 2 defensive backs in this class. I think he's that good. Not a lot of people talk about him because Florida State wasn't very good this year. But I think he had a very good Senior Bowl. He's impressed a lot of people, I believe. It's helped his stock rise a lot from, I think, probably starting off in the second round. Now I think he could definitely go late first round, which is obviously where I kind of have him here. I think he could be so good for any team that needs a good one-on-one man coverage and can really just do it all kind of corner, right? He has all the intangibles, all the builds. I think he's going to test great also at the Combine. To get him here at 23, I think is great value for the Packers that need a guy in this spot, potentially, with things how things are going with Jair Alexander. It kind of feels like it's heading towards a divorce. So getting a guy that could come in and replace him, and you have a guy like Nixon in there already, I think would be a great spot to get a guy like Azare Thomas for the Green Bay Packers. So getting him at this spot, even if Jair stays, you could still draft him, would be great and fine by me, definitely. So definitely one of the guys that I'm very high on in this draft class, Azare Thomas. Remember Azare Thomas when we're in the regular season, and if he's playing great, don't be surprised because I think he's that talented. But that's pick number 23 for the Packers. Then at number 24, I have the Vikings selecting Kelvin Banks, tackle / maybe offensive guard from Texas. There are some questions about his size, not being tall enough, I guess, to be like your traditional offensive tackle. So regardless of that, I feel like the Vikings can use him wherever they see fit because they are in danger of losing their guard, Dalton Reisner, to free agency. He is going to be a free agent this offseason. And the next offseason, you have Garrett Bradbury, their center, who could also be a free agent. So you don't want to just kind of ignore the offensive line and think that losing guys like this isn't important. You got to try and refill those spots as quickly as possible. So getting a guy like Kelvin Banks here, who I probably end up thinking he's going to play guard, you can have him go in there, ease him into that guard position for maybe Dalton Risner if he doesn't come back, or for Dalton Risner for a season or two, and then he kind of steps in. I think that would be a very smart thing to do for the Vikings because they have everything else, right? You don't need wide receivers. You don't need a running back, really. Quarterback is obviously one where you don't really know, but I think it's going to be J.J. McCarthy anyway. Making sure he's protected, coming off of a pretty severe injury. Getting a guy like Kelvin Banks helping that offensive line is going to be huge for them. So I went with that at number 24. Then at number 25, another offensive lineman, I got Josh Simmons going to the Houston Texans. Simply, CJ got hit too many times, right? Caleb Williams was the most sacked quarterback last year, and they were not very good. The Texans were clearly better than them, but CJ got sacked almost as much as Caleb Williams did. And it was a very rough year because of that. And I'm not saying it's all on that, but it definitely didn't help whatsoever. So bringing in a guy at offensive line, I think that's like undisputable. Like, the Texans have to go offensive line, whoever it is, unless it's someone that I guess should be going later in the draft. If you got the options of going with Josh Simmons or Donovan Jackson or Kelvin Banks or any other guy that maybe drops a little bit, the Texans have to take them. Simply as that, because CJ can't be getting hit that many times. So I had Josh Simmons being at this spot. It could, again, like I said, be anybody from the offensive line group with a first-round grade, but it just so happened to be Josh Simmons the way I had this mock draft lined up. So you get a former Buckeye in there protecting a Buckeye quarterback. I think it's too good to pass up on. So Josh Simmons ends up here at number 25. Then at number 26, the Los Angeles Rams. I alluded to it before when we talked about Jonathan Allen, where I thought the Rams could be a spot for him. Now at number 26, I had the Rams actually selecting Kenneth Grant, defensive tackle from Michigan. Huge guy, absolute beast of a guy in the middle of that defense. He has got a lot of potential, right? You hear that with a lot of people, but it feels like his skill set is still not as defined as other people, and that could be worked on, obviously, but the intangibles he has, the size, the skill set, the natural athleticism is something that could be very exciting. And it seems like the Rams do a fantastic job with developing guys at that spot, right? You look at Kobe Turner, Braden Fisk, Jared Verse on the outside a little bit more, obviously. Same thing with Young on the other side. You add Kenneth Grant to that for a team that needs to shore up their run defense, I think would be a fantastic thing to have. And they would definitely arguably have one of the best, if not definitely one of the best defensive lines in the entire NFL if Kenneth Grant, pieces it all together relatively quickly. That could be a scary group, very scary group. So I'm going to go with the Rams here to get Kenneth Grant. Then at number 27, the Baltimore Ravens. I didn't really know where to go with them because I feel like they're very good already. Now that I'm thinking about it, maybe they could get a guy like Luther Burden. I wouldn't be too surprised by that, wide receiver. But I actually have them selecting Malachi Starks on here because their pass defense was pretty suspect a couple of times last season. It definitely got fixed, right? But the idea of pairing Malachi Starks with Kyle Hamilton, making that defense even better than what it already is a very exciting thing to have. And it allows you to move Kyle Hamilton a lot more around all over the defense, right? Which is ideally where he's best utilized. So I think that would be awesome for them to have, a luxury for them to have, especially this late. Malachi Starks could probably be going like anywhere from like 13 to definitely like 23, I would say. So to get him at 27, I think would be too good to pass up on for the Ravens. Then at number 28, I got the Lions selecting Donovan Jackson, a interior offensive lineman as well. I wanted to go pass rusher here, but I didn't just want to take anybody if I didn't really think that they should be there. So I feel like you can't go wrong with offensive linemen, especially because Kevin Zeitler, their starting right guard, I believe. He's going to be a free agent. He's on the older side now a little bit, so bringing in a guy like Donovan Jackson to kind of step in for him if he does move on or if he's only there for another year. You got a guy like Donovan Jackson that could step in right away. You can't go wrong with a pick like that. So they're very run-heavy also with Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery. They're going to need to keep that offensive line to that level as much as possible. So I went with Donovan Jackson here. Then at number 29, for the Washington Commanders, also another team that I talked about reassuring that defensive line before, I have them selecting Derek Harmon, defensive tackle from Oregon. They could end up losing Jonathan Allen. If not, I don't think you could go wrong with adding another piece to that defensive line because they got gashed by Philly so easily. And Derek Harmon gives you that quality and quantity that you need at this spot, and he's definitely a starting caliber guy on that defensive line. So if they bring him in as well, if they lose Jonathan Allen or not, it's going to be a great pick regardless. So I love this pick for them. For him to still be there, I think would be great. At number 30, the Buffalo Bills. Pretty simply, I have them selecting Maxwell Hairston, cornerback from Kentucky, because in that championship game, as soon as Kaiir Elam came in, and I don't want to make it seem like he lost them the game by himself, but you could easily tell that once he came in, the Chiefs were throwing to him very often, a lot, once he came in, and it was a problem, obviously. So addressing that spot with a guy that I think a lot of people will be very high on in Maxwell Hairston, especially late in the first round, I think would be a great selection for them. And they got a guy that's very good in man coverage and things like that, that allows them to do a lot of different things, right? Even they play a lot of zone too, so I believe he can thrive in any system, really. So I went with Maxwell Hairston here. Then the last two are Super Bowl teams. At number 31, I have the Kansas City Chiefs. Easily, they need a left tackle. Easily, right? Because that offensive line was terrible. That offensive line was terrible in the Super Bowl. Very disappointing. So I went with a guy like Josh Conerly. Josh Conerly from Oregon. To put in there at left tackle allows you to move Joe Thuney back to left guard, shoring up that blind side for Patrick Mahomes. And Josh Conerly only gave up 2 sacks in his 3 years at Oregon, and he's exactly what they need there, right? You need a good left tackle there. It hasn't worked out with their options in the past. You got to try again because you have to get it right, clearly, with Patrick Mahomes there. I think Josh Conerly can come in right away and compete for that spot, and I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up being their starting left tackle. So I went with him here at number 31. Then lastly, at 32, the Eagles. I went with a defensive lineman like they always select, not from Georgia this time from Ohio State. I went with Tyleik Williams, just based on the fact that they could lose Milton Williams or Josh Sweat in free agency. They're not going to get caught lacking with very little depth at defensive line. So getting a guy like Tyleik Williams here who has a late first-round grade, early second-round grade at 32, I think would be something that they would be very interested in. So that is all 32 picks. That is my mock draft. I'm very confident in it. I think it's going to be exactly like this when April comes around, or very similar, very close to. I feel very confident in it now that I have it out there for everyone to see. So let me know what your guys' thoughts are on it. And for right now, that does conclude our show, our last show on here. Just a quick thanks to everybody for always tuning in, and to GSMC, obviously, for giving me this opportunity. Again, this is our last show, and as always, I do want to thank you guys and remind you guys to always like, follow, and subscribe to not only the show, right, even if we are moving on, to subscribe to the show, the network, the GSMC Sports Network, the GSMC Podcast Network, because all those guys do a great job. So they're going to be covering football, basketball, and all that sort of stuff. Even if I'm moving on, they're going to be doing a great job at it as well. So make sure to do that. Tune into their shows, tune into the network, and just continue to follow up on it. It's a lot of great stuff out there. And for us, again, another big thank you to you guys. I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your week, and I'm sure we'll probably be seeing each other at some point down the line. But for right now, thanks again, and I hope you guys have a great rest of the week and also a great rest of your night.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit and the